an analysis of the evolution of U.S. nation-building strategy since World War II. U.S. foreign policy has long exhibited an ambivalent but profound relationship with nation-building. This dynamic is perfectly captured by President George W. Bush's shift from rejecting the concept in 2000 to asserting its necessity before the Iraq War, reflecting a deep tension between American skepticism toward social engineering and the recurring strategic need to stabilize failed states. Since the Cold War, the U.S. has frequently undertaken nation-building to counter threats arising from global instability. To analyze this history accurately, clear definitions are essential, as the term nation-building is often used imprecisely. European observers often argue that nations evolve organically, not through external construction. Therefore, the analysis distinguishes between nation-building, creating shared identity, state-building, constructing tangible institutions, reconstruction, rebuilding physical infrastructure, and development, fostering long-term economic growth. In U.S. policy discourse, nation-building is typically used in a composite sense, referring to the combination of state-building and economic development, often in a post-conflict environment. This paper adopts this specific usage throughout its analysis. The central argument of this analysis is that U.S. nation-building policy has been persistently undermined by a cyclical failure of institutional memory. Hard-won strategic lessons from one era are frequently discarded in the next, leading to the repetition of costly errors. This failure was particularly damaging in the post-9/11 era, directly contributing to the immense difficulties in Afghanistan and Iraq. The report traces this evolution across 4 distinct periods: the post-World War II golden age of confidence in state-led development, the subsequent collapse of this consensus following the Vietnam War, the painful relearning process of the 1990s, and the failure to fully institutionalize that knowledge, and finally, a deep analysis of contemporary failures in Afghanistan and Iraq. The immediate post-World War II decades represented the golden age of U.S. nation-building, characterized by high confidence and broad collaboration. This approach originated from ambitious New Deal domestic projects like the TVA and was successfully exported via the Marshall Plan and the occupation of Japan. This experience fostered a strong belief in the power of state planning and technical assistance to modernize societies. During the Cold War, this ideology became a central strategic tool, with policymakers believing that promoting development was crucial to outcompete communist influence. This era was defined by a collaborative ethos, with government agencies working closely with major foundations, e.g. Ford, Rockefeller, universities, e.g. MSU, private firms, and newly created international bodies to promote political and economic modernization, as exemplified in South Korea. The Vietnam War served as the crucible that shattered this development consensus, triggering a profound intellectual and political crisis. The pacification efforts were inextricably linked to the failed military campaign, tainting the entire concept of development. Intellectual critiques arose from both the right, challenging foreign aid, and the left, dependency theory, while new social movements questioned Western growth models. This crisis was reflected in policy shifts. The Nixon administration introduced new directions to distance the U.S. from direct involvement, leading to the disfavor of U.S. aid. Crucially, the cooperative ethos unraveled, with NGOs and universities growing reluctant to work as adjuncts to a foreign policy they increasingly opposed, thus fracturing the nation-building community. The 1990s marked a critical period of relearning as the U.S. faced complex contingencies in Somalia, Haiti, Bosnia, and Kosovo. By the end of the decade, a consensus had emerged around 6 strategic lessons, including the necessity of comprehensive political military planning, clear command and control, and tailored capabilities. These lessons were formally codified in Presidential Decision Directive PDD 56. However, much of this institutional knowledge was lost after the 2000 election. The incoming Bush administration was ideologically opposed to the very concept of nation-building, viewing it as a misuse of military power. This ideological stance created a profound disinterest in the lessons of the 1990s, and PDD 56 was allowed to lapse, leaving the government without a unified playbook for post-conflict operations before 9/11. This institutional void was compounded by a virulent interagency power struggle leading up to the Iraq War. In a break from precedent, the Pentagon was granted sole ownership of the post-conflict reconstruction effort, sidelining the deep developmental and regional expertise of the State Department and USAID. This decision ensured that an agency with limited capacity was put in charge of the most complex nation-building task the U.S. had ever attempted. Afghanistan tragically illustrated the consequences of underinvestment and neglect. The initial light footprint strategy, relying on a small military presence, created a power vacuum that allowed local warlords to consolidate power and the opium economy to explode. Furthermore, the reliance on the predominantly Tajik Northern Alliance created a, quote, birth defect in the new government, undermining its political legitimacy from the start among the Pashtun plurality. Iraq, conversely, was a failure of overreach and strategic hubris. The Coalition Provisional Authority, CPA, made two calamitous errors: the broad de-Ba'athification policy, which alienated the Sunni minority, and the disbanding of the Iraqi army, which instantly created a massive security vacuum and a pool of recruits for the nascent insurgency. This heavy footprint occupation was perceived as foreign domination, fueling resistance and highlighting the critical importance of local democratic legitimacy, as Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani effectively demonstrated. A synthesis of this history highlights 5 enduring principles. Security is the sine qua non. Legitimacy must be local and cultivated through fair processes. Integrated planning must occur before intervention. International coalitions are vital force multipliers. And finally, resources must match ambition. To break the destructive cycle of institutional amnesia, the U.S. must institutionalize an integrated interagency planning process, fully fund a rapidly deployable civilian response capability, and adopt a doctrine of strategic patience.